It's one that's taught in Sunday school to little children. We talk about the loaves and the fish. And we begin chapter 6 in the Gospel of John. And it says, sometime after this, Jesus crossed to the far shore of the Sea of Galilee. That is the Sea of Tiberias. And a great crowd of people followed him because they saw the miraculous signs he has performed on the sick. And so they listened to him there. And finally it was getting on towards dinner time. And they began saying, you know what, these people are hungry. Why don't you just send them away so that they can go to the towns and the villages and find something to eat? And so the disciples were kind of on that course. And Jesus said, I like that. You give them something to eat. Have the people sit down finally. And in verse 10 of chapter 6. That's after they had scouted around. They didn't come up with much. And Jesus was given some fish and loaves of bread and not much. And he said, sit down. Have them sit down. And remember, Jesus began to multiply the loaves and the fish. They saw a sign that we are not dealing with just anybody here. There's something special about this man, Jesus. And we go through chapter 6, and we come down to verse 35. And in verse 35, Jesus declared, I am the bread of life. You see, what you saw in me performing the miracle, this is after nighttime, and now this was the next day when they followed him and they still wanted more of Jesus. And we come to verse 35 and he says, I'm the bread of life. He who comes to me will never go hungry, and who believes in me will never be thirsty. He who puts his whole life in my hands, he who trusts me, he who wants to follow me, he who believes in me, he who believes in me will never be thirsty. Verses 48 through 51 of that text. I'm the bread of life, he says again. Your fathers ate the manna in the desert, yet they died. But here is the bread that comes down from heaven, which a man may eat and not die, he'll live. I'm the living bread that came down from heaven. If anyone eats of this bread, he will live forever. This bread is my flesh, which I give for the life of the world. For the life of the world? He had given life to man. And now, in the very beginning, and now he was going to give his body, his life, for the life of the world. Jesus, we see miracle. We see a calling for belief. We see the results of that, which is life to those who believe in Jesus Christ. There's also chapter 8 and verse 12. Actually, chapter 8 begins. And do you remember the rulers, some of the important people of the first century? They found a woman caught in adultery, and they bring her to Jesus. And they said, here, Jesus, now what are you going to do about this? What are you going to do about this? We caught her in the very act of adultery. I've always wanted to know, how did you do that? And what was going on with you that you would catch her in adultery? Well, they bring her to Jesus, and they throw her down in front of him, and basically they say, what are you going to do about this? And so Jesus began to write on the ground, you remember. And then one by one, starting with the oldest and going to the youngest, they began to leave quietly after Jesus wrote on the ground. Jesus said, where are they? Where are they, your accusers? He said, neither do I condemn you either. Just go and sin no more. Leave your life of sin. What a miracle. After the freeing of the woman caught in adultery, we read verse 12 in chapter 8. When Jesus spoke again to the people, he said, I am the light of the world. whoever follows me, believes, will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. And the Pharisees began to challenge him. Here you are, appearing as your own witness, and your testimony is not valid. And here were the naysayers beginning to question who he was and to judge him and who he was. Jesus said, whoever follows me will have the light of life. I want you to know, whoever follows Jesus, the light, as opposed to the darkness of promiscuous lifestyle, whoever follows him will have the light in opposition to judgmental and harsh attitudes towards others. Whoever follows him would have the light as opposed to those who live a life of skepticism, being skeptical about who Jesus is. He says whoever follows him would have light as they follow the light. Well, they questioned his credentials. You know that the credentials of Jesus are questioned today. They are viciously attacked in the world in which we live. Some say, well, and some religions say, well, he was just a prophet. You know, he really wasn't the Son of God. And some say, well, did he really live? Most people think he did. Some wonder that. They even question that. They question the empty tomb. Are you really sure about that? Surely there has to be some skeleton somewhere in Jesus' closet, and we see that portrayed by some of the liberal movies that have been made about him in more recent years. Attacks on who Jesus is. But you know what? Anyone who believes in him will have life. You don't attack something you don't fear. You don't attack something that isn't true. Come to me, whoever follows me will have the light of life. There is chapter 10, and verses 7 through 14, going quickly. In chapter 10, Jesus talks about himself as being the good shepherd and about giving his life for the world. And he says, if you trust me and I'm the gate for the sheep, you can come in and out and have pasture. And I'll take care of you. Just trust me to be your shepherd. Like the shepherd in Psalm 23 that is written about by King David. Trust me and follow me. And he says, I tell you the truth, starting in verse 7 of chapter 10. Tell you the truth, I'm the gate for the sheep. All who ever came before me were thieves and robbers, but the sheep did not listen to them. They couldn't hold it together. I'm the gate. Whoever enters through me will be saved, and he will come in and go out and find pasture. And the thief comes only to steal and to kill and to destroy. And I've come that they may have life and have it to the full. There's that word again that we find being woven throughout the Gospel of John. Come to Jesus and you can have life and have it to the full. Real quickly, there's another one in chapter 11. Chapter 11 is probably one of my favorite chapters in all of the Gospel of John. Do you remember, in chapter 11, it is the story of the raising of Lazarus. Lazarus and his sisters Mary and Martha had been dear friends, and they still were dear friends. And word was sent to Jesus that their brother Lazarus was sick. And Jesus just kind of, well, he didn't get in a hurry. And he said, yeah, I know. Well, I don't know if he said it that way, but about 4 days later, Jesus finally reached the destination. By the time he got there, they came to him and they were in tears. And they said, if only you had been here, our brother Lazarus would not have died. But now here we all are, and well, we're glad you're here, but if you had been here just a couple days earlier, did they know who they were talking to? Did you ever think of that? Did they understand who they were talking to? Jesus, Son of God. What a scene. We come to verse 25. Martha answered, I know he's going to rise in the resurrection at the last day. And Jesus said to her, what? I am the resurrection. One of the great I ams also in the Gospel of John. I am the resurrection and the life. You remember life had come from him at the beginning. He is the life still today to those who choose to follow him as Lord. I'm the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me will live, even though he dies, and whoever lives and believes in me will never die. Do you believe this? Remember those three words? Life, sign, believe. We see those throughout the Gospel of John. Finally, we come down to verse 43, and we see the miracle. When he had said this, Jesus called in a loud voice, Lazarus, come out. And the dead man came out, his hands and feet wrapped with strips of linen and a cloth around his face. And Jesus said to them, take off the grave clothes and let him go. Can you imagine what it would have been like to have been there on that day and Jesus yells out into the tomb and here Lazarus comes forth? Jesus can do that because he is the life. And those who come to him can have life today. What a scene. What a scene. Well, there's many more texts. We don't have time to go through all of them. But many more texts that talk about these words. There's John 14 and John 15 and so on. But life, sign, and believe. 3 words. There's also a message. Isn't there? There's a message to the Gospel of John. It's why it is the most beloved of all the Gospels today. It's why it's probably the most beloved of all the books of the Bible. This Gospel of John. The message is trust him. He's the answer. He's the answer in a world that discards his authority, in a world that says you don't have to trust him. A world that discards him. Jesus is the answer in a world that sees all religions as equal. You know, I was thinking as I was preparing this sermon this past week, there is Greenland Road in Mandarin, which is South Jacksonville. I go down that road often, and I turn off of St. Augustine Road, and right there on the corner is a huge Catholic church. And I begin down Greenland Road, and I don't go very far, and I see this nice building in the back, and meeting back there is those of the Baha'i faith, Eastern religion. And right beside that one is the Hindu building. And so a Catholic church, a Baha'i church, or not a church, I don't think they call it, and also where the Hindus meet and have their offices and all of that. And then I keep going down that road and I come to Christ Church in Mandarin that preaches the gospel. And I see all of that. And then when I start going around Jacksonville, I go up San Jose Boulevard. And when I go up San Jose Boulevard, there are a couple of Jewish synagogues. And I go over on the east side on 295. And going down 295, after you go over this, what's the name of the bridge? Anyway, the big bridge. And I always enjoy going over that bridge. But you don't go too far, and you see off to the right a Muslim mosque. And there it is by Atlantic Boulevard and 295.